Tungsten. Oh, that's the name of my dragon. Hi. Well, welcome again. Episode number 2. All right, so let's review. Last episode we talked about was posture and how it affects drawing at the table. This one now, we are going to talk about the tools of the trade in drawing. For instance, most of you are familiar with these type of pencils. They are what you call the AB and number 2 pencils. You use them in school all the time, but these aren't the ones that we're going to be using. In fact, we're going to be talking about erasers, pencils, drawing boards, straight edges, T-squares, triangles, and how all these are going to benefit you in your skill set of drawing. Before we really get into the drawing, which will be the 3rd episode, you have to know what tools you're using. So once again, we talked about posture. Now we're going to talk about the tools, how to use them, proper ways to use them, the terminology, if you will, on what we use in the field of drawing. So let's head over to the studio and start working on this next episode. Hammer, drill. Pinchers, or actually wire cutters. Phillips screwdriver. Why did I bring those tools out? Well, to prove or to show or illustrate a point. If a person, let's say a carpenter, were building something, would he use a drill to hammer a tool? Obviously not. How about wire cutters? Would he use a hammer? No. The point that I'm making here is that there is a certain tool for every job, no matter what occupation there is. And that's no exception in the arts. And time again, the wrong tools are used for the wrong job. Illustration with pencil, people, teachers, and I know I'm capping on them, but hey, 90% of they said teachers in high school and especially in middle school don't know what the heck they're talking about. And I'm going to give this illustration. I know I'm going to offend some people, but we're talking about students here who want to learn how and to understand the tools that they're working with. Many teachers who are teaching in these classes are basically teachers who know how to draw. They have a degree in English, mathematics, science. And so for extracurricular, the administration says, well, you know how to draw, teach an art class. And they have some basic skill and some basic knowledge. But if one of those students was really trying to get into the arts, such as film, set design, illustration for advertising, animation, they don't know where they're going to direct them to. They don't even know what type of tools to use. That's the sad part. That's why I'm saying the majority of teachers really don't have that skill set. I know a bit about algebra, geometry. I know my history. I love history. But imagine right now if I were to teach an advanced reading class or an advanced math class. All right, guys, just come in and figure out your problems. That wouldn't work. And that's exactly what we see in the arts. They turn around, they add these teachers in without any kind of knowledge whatsoever. Even administrators will talk about art as being fun, enrichment, as I said earlier. But that doesn't help the students at all. What's good about YouTube is that we're not confined to just a half hour or an hour to any one program. And in this program, we're not going to be in just one half-hour assignment or a half-hour increment. Some are going to be 45 minutes. In this case, this may be a little longer. Trust me, I'll try to make it a little more interesting. I really have to because I don't want to lose you. And the same thing with art history. I love art history. I didn't before, I do now. And what I will do is make it more interesting. If, for example, rather than talk about dates and times and when people were born, we talk about the art, the differences between fact and supposition and theory. Okay, I'm going down the wrong rabbit hole. I know. Come back. I'm back! I'm back! All right, I'm back. Now, let's get back to what we're talking about. What this episode is going to talk about is about tools, how to use them, and the supplies you're going to need in order to get to the next step. We talked about posture. We're talking now about tools. The next step is going to be drawing and composition. And it's going to be the basics. But in order to get there, we have to go here after we've gone there. Does that make any sense? It will. It will. All right, so let's go take a look at some of our tools. Yeah. All right, let's begin. As I talked about earlier, we were talking about tools and how the right ones are to be used and for whatever job we're working on. And today we're working on the beginning of drawing. All right, so let's start off. First of all, as you can probably see here, I have a work table that I use. Now, one of these tables, including your light, they can run you anywhere between $150 to $200 for your least expensive. And of course you can get one that's very expensive, but why? I mean, this would probably work for you very, very well. Now let's say you can't afford a table like this. Well, then there is what we call the drawing board. Now the drawing board is probably going to be a tool that you will end up using quite a bit. It looks like this. This is your drawing board. And what you're able to do is to place your paper onto here, use your clips here, and that will be able to hold your paper if you have a pad of paper. And then of course your rubber band here is what keeps everything together. Now, here's what I'd recommend. I would recommend only using these clips to carry your work. If you're going to draw on this, you're going to want to have your paper taped to this using your straight edge, moving up and down, and then of course using your triangle, which I have here to slide back and forth. Ooh-wee. Okay, we're going to go over everything in detail.
Now, for some of you, this might be somewhat elementary. It may be really basic, but I want to go over everything all together. You can fast forward this. You can skip this if you'd like, but this is for those who are really looking into starting on the right foot. And that's exactly why I am taking my time going through every bit of these tools and going through details with them. All right, so this is going to be your drawing board. Now, this is usually your standard size. They do have smaller ones. They're a little harder to find, which, as you can see here, is used for like younger kids. It only has one clip. And of course, if maybe not necessarily even for younger kids, but if you have a smaller sheet of paper, you can apply that to here. What's good about these is that you're able to take them on site and you're able to do drawings out in the open. You're able to take them and not have to worry about hauling off a whole table out there, and be able to sketch whatever you want out in the open field. All right, let's talk about the T-square here. Whoopsie daisy. Let's get this here and here. On the last episode, we talked about the T-squares, and I used a metal T-square here, like this. Now, this I explained is a type of T-square which is used for framing. Why? Well, I can show you that. Because if you are cutting your mat, and I'm not going to cut it because I don't want to have to cut on the table, but if I'm cutting, I am not having to worry about marring any of my work here. This is designed to keep the metal right here on here. If I scrape over here, I'm not going to chip and bite into this here. So this is, your metal T-squares are going to be used primarily for cutting mat. That's what you want to get this T-square for. So I wouldn't recommend a metal T-square. A wood T-square we want to use, and I'm going to show you the differences between the two. Let me set this up here so you can compare between the two here. This is a drafting T-square. Now you can tell here with the wood here, and you're going to see these clear little panels on the side. Why the clear panels? Well, you're going to see that when you lay your T-square onto the paper, and you'll be able to see this when I demonstrate this in a little bit. When you make your line and you need to push over that line, you'll be able to see through this. Or you can line that up with this area here and know that you have a perfect distance between here and here. Let's take a look and see what the distance, I believe, yep, is right around a quarter, nope, yeah, about a quarter-inch width on that side there. Okay, so this is going to be called your T-square. We can also refer to it as the straight edge. This is, whoopsie daisy, these two here are called straight edges. Now, the first thing you're going to say is, that's a ruler. Yeah, you could go about calling these rulers, but we're not calling them rulers, and here's the reason why. Although they have numbers on here, we're using the edge of the, whoa, stay right here. We're using the edge of the ruler as a straight edge to keep our line straight. So hence, we always want to call this a straight edge. I will get on my students when they say, Professor, where's the ruler? I go, I don't know, until they call it a straight edge. So we want to call this, anything that we're drawing with is a straight edge. Unless you're measuring, and you're going to be able to measure for other projects down the road, then you're going to say, I need a ruler, I need a yardstick, I need measuring tape. The only time we call this is when we are measuring something. But if you're drawing with it, refer to it as a straight edge. It'll make you sound more sophisticated in the arts. All right. So we're going to move this out of the way, and now we're going to move on to our next step. Okay, so next step is we're going to take, now we call this paper here, we call this paper the picture plane. Now I'm going to get into paper after we go into the tools, because there's a variety of papers. It starts from newsprint all the way to illustration board, and we're going to go into that. Again, that's why I'm saying this episode is going to be a bit longer, because we're going to be covering quite a bit. All right, so when we want to get this completely square, now of course you can see on this side I have my my scale, my pencil scale here, which we're going to talk about because we're going to get into pencils. I'm going to take this, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my T-square, make sure that my T-square is butted up against the side just like this. We now have, as I said earlier, we now have a perfect horizontal line. And I can bring this down here so that I'm, again, as we talked about posture, I'm going right over my image here. I'm going to put my X-Acto knife down because I don't need that right now. I'm going to take my tape, and as a review, we showed this last time about taping our image down to make sure that it's fixed to the desk or the image of what we're using here. Right? I'm going to take this, lay it right up here, make sure that my T-square is butted up against the side, and now I'm going to tape my image down. Whoops, it moved a bit. Now, the other thing that we want to talk about is the tape. You want to use an acid-free tape. Well, let me retract that. When you're tacking stuff down, you don't necessarily have to use an acid-free tape. You can use a masking tape. Now, there is an artist tape. It has less tack on it, but it's much more expensive. An old trick that my professors taught us was to take your masking tape and then just tack it on your jeans, your pants, and it removes some of the tack. And you can use that on there so it doesn't pull up the paper on your image or your picture plane. All right. Voila. We now have a perfect horizontal position, and I can slide my image up and down, well, not left and right, but up and down. Now, let's go to the next step. These are our triangles. This one is a 90, 60, 30 triangle. This one here is a 90, 45, 45 angle. Now, you'll notice that they're clear, and this is what I'm recommending. A clear triangle so that you can see through the image. If you get an opaque one, you're not going to be able to see what's underneath that. This one has a protractor already in it, and this one, as you can see, has a French curve. Protractor, French curve. Yes. French curves are used to make your curves. They're utilized in ink, and we'll talk about that when we get into inks and technical pens. I prefer and recommend the 90, 45, 45. If you can get one also that is a 30, 60, 90, that's great. You can utilize that because you're going to end up using, as I lay these on top of each other, you have a slighter angle than a regular 45 angle. So you can steepen your line if you're not trying to get an exact 45 on that and you need to move that to a 30. You can, or that's a 30 right there, or if you need to move to a, oh boy, 60 as I have here. All right. Once I have my T-square here, now I have my triangle. Now, there are bigger triangles. I'd recommend the bigger the better. Okay, because obviously if I'm down here, if I have a larger triangle, it's going to cover a lot of the picture plane, and it's going to cover that area even better. So now I have a vertical and left and right vertical line, horizontal line, and I can move those that are perfectly square, and I can make those lines any way I want, meaning they're going to be perfectly perpendicular and horizontal. Right now I'm ready to draw. I have my tools, I'm set and ready to go. However, let's talk about the next part, which is going to be pencils. The pencil, as we talked about earlier, is not as simple. It's rather complex. I have a series of pencils here which are marked. And now, I know in some tutorials, they actually show you the pencils. We all know what the pencils are like, and I'm going to just show you here real quick one. There are different brands. This one here is called a Master's Touch, a brand, nice pencil. There's also a turquoise pencil, general pencils. I've used all of them. And for me, they're all fine. Really, I have not had, you're going to probably find some other professional artists and instructors will say, "Oh no, I go by general. Oh no, I go specifically with turquoise." And Master's Touch is rather new, and you can find Master's Touch at Hobby Lobby, not a sponsor, um, but that's where you can get a lot of your supplies and your tools. If you're getting into that more advanced stage, the ones you're going to end up wanting to use is going to be Blick. Now, they are a mail order supplier, but I'll tell you, Blick is like the Disneyland for artists. I'm telling you, I never want to walk into the store because I have no idea what I'm going to come out with. Just things that I just like, oh, and we'll probably know because the Blick is here in the general area where I am, and you'll be able to see that. Their stuff, a lot of it. Okay, let's go over the shades. Now, this is a pencil scale. It gives you from light to dark. Each one of these you will see is numerically in order, and they're also followed by a letter. The two letters are H and B. B is going to be your section that are your soft leads. H are going to be your hard leads. What does H stand for? Well, that's not hard to remember. It's a hard lead. B, which you think would be soft, actually stands for black. So you have your pencils from 9H to 9B. Now, 10 and 11B are relatively new, and I believe there's also a 12B. Those came out relatively new. Now, back in the 80s, they only came, yeah, I'm old. They only came out to a 9B. But now you can see this 11B is almost as dark as my table here. It's really gotten even darker. Now, I must add this. Some of you are wondering, hey, if I want to go darker, can I use charcoal? Yes, you can. But also remember this. Like water and oil that do not mix, they don't like each other, nor does graphite or charcoal. They don't get along. You can turn around and put this down with graphite and try to put charcoal over that. It's going to slip right over it. It's not going to stick to it at all. And you're going to find that you'll feel that slip right over. So I don't recommend using charcoal with your graphite. That's the other thing. We don't call it lead. This is called graphite. 90% of this is graphite that we're using in our tools. So you want to use the proper terminology that it's a graphite pencil. Now, you will find on pencils, they have the name, and just above that, on the back, is the numerical number which represents the lead. Oh, did you hear what I just said? Lead. The graphite. Old school. Sometimes it slips out. So, that denotes what you're using. Now, in the packs, you're going to get these packs, and they will come in a B pack, and they will come with an H pack. So if you want, and they're going to run you about $8-9 for these pencils. Now, if you're using them quite a bit, keep in mind that your softer graphites are going to, I know I keep slipping out with leads because those are the terms we use, but we don't want to use the word lead. The type of graphite that you have is going to be used quite a bit, meaning that your B's are going to be worn down very quickly. Your H's are going to last practically forever. They really will. All right, so when do we use these and how do we go about using them? All right, first of all, what we do is I usually start off, this is going to be your middle area of your pencils, between your F and your HB. What is HB? Hard black. Kind of contradiction in terms, but yep, that's what it means. Hard black. Black, 2 black, 3 black, 4 black, etc., etc. F, H hard, 2 hard, 3 hard, 4 hard, and etc., etc., all the way down. I usually start off in the center. I'm using a 2B, which is right here in this section, to talk about what we have here. And this is where I usually start. This is my starting point. Now, I'm going to stop right here. Just because I start in this area does not mean other artists do. So you will probably find, and I'm also going to have tutorials that will connect to other artists so that you can utilize their skills as well. But this is where now, whatever I'm showing you isn't locked in stone. You will find things that others artists use different styles, they use a different type, they'll approach something completely different than the way I do. That's just the way, this is where I usually start. Sometimes I even start with a 2B, but I won't ever start over here or way over here. And I'm going to explain why. Your hard pencils, which are going to be from, I'm going to say from about 2H, it can be 2H out this way, are going to primarily be used for your background drawings. Okay, and the reason you're using this is to create that image like you have a depth of field. It's to push everything back. So the next question is, how hard should I push on my pencil? Well, in actuality, you really shouldn't be carving down so hard on your pencil. I've seen this with beginner artists. It's going to happen to you, especially when we get into tracing, which we'll use, is you carve into the paper. You don't need to carve. You should actually be drawing fairly light. And this is, again, my 2B pencil. Now, what I'm doing here is cross-hatching. Again, something we'll get into later, dealing with ink. And I'm actually just lightly going over this, not really having to push down at all. Now, I may push down a little bit if I want to get a little refined with this. But in all actuality, I shouldn't have to push any harder than that. Because if I want to get darker, then I'm going to move from a 2B to a 3B or a 4B. I'm going to move my pencil, I'm going to pull out a darker pencil to get a darker area. You're not going to push down. Once you start pushing down and you feel yourself pushing down, stop. You're going too hard on your paper. You want to treat your paper gently. You don't want to tear up the fibers. All right? So, let's move to a 6B. I'm going to just jump around. And what I'm doing is, for the sake of time, I don't want to bore you with every single thing that I'm working with. Okay, so now watch what I'm going to use the same pressure as I did with the 2B. This is now a 6B, just so that you see, and I'm not lying to you, 6B. All right, so same pressure, but you can see now, you can see the differences between those blends there. Let's go darker. I'm going to go to the 9B. 9B, or there you are. Okay. Now I haven't sharpened my pencils. I'm going to get into that a little later because right now I'm showing you the tools. That's the most important part. Now I'm going to go to a 9B. Still, I am not really pushing any harder than I was before. And yet, you can see the darkness and the change in gradation just by changing my pencils, but not pushing very hard on the paper. You don't want to do that. Okay, now, let's say we want to blend. Oh, that's the other term. We don't use smudge. It's blend. All right, for those of you who have ASMR, just like I do, okay. These are your blending stumps. Blending stump, okay? We don't call it a smear stick. We don't call it a smudge stick. Let me explain. That's a smudge. We're not doing that. We are blending. So if I want to take this, I can blend these and blend this right out. As you can see, I went right over my cross hatching. And there we go. We can see how we've created our gradation. Now, what I've actually done is I've taken some of that 6B and 9B and pulled it into the 2B. Okay? You can use your finger. There are some professors who will say, "Ugh, taboo." I usually say it's okay. Like I said, there are no written final rules before I go any further. You will hear later on down the road, it may sound like I'm contradicting myself, and art has a lot of contradictions to it. But remember this, and now keep this in mind. Before you can break a rule, you have to understand and know the rule before you can break it. Just keep that in mind, because that's going to be affected later on in our tutorials. Because you're going to see, wait a minute, when we first started, he was talking about not doing this. Now he's doing it. That's because I know the rule and I can break it. Along with that comes experience too. All right. So you can see now what we're talking about as far as what we're dealing with as far as shade. This is important because when we get into the next part of our tutorial, which will be drawing and composition, we're going to be utilizing these shades to create a sphere. Don't sphere the sphere. Yes, I said it. The cone and the cube. We're going to be working on those, and then we will be working on compositional, on how composition works. I was trying to be fancy with my compositional word, but that did not work out. Okay, so my composition word. Oh, another thing. My wife will be looking at some of these videos because this professor, I have dyslexia and an auditory processing disorder. So, not that any of you will ask me any questions, but I may say something and it may come out a little backwards, or I may stumble on my words. I'm not saying this to turn around and say, oh, woe is me. I want you to understand that just because you have certain disabilities, certain things like learning, I'm a global visual learner. I have to see things in order to be able to understand what we're talking about. Don't let that hold you back. Just move forward. And that's exactly what I've done. You move forward. All right. Again, I have no idea how that, I know why I wanted to say that, was because if I say something and it sounds a little backwards, just bear with me. You can also write that in the comments later on down the road. Professor, did you mean such and such? Probably turn around and go, oh, no, I didn't. Okay. Let's now talk about erasers. Now, I have three. Where are you going? Stay. I have 3 erasers here. I lied. 4 erasers. The pink pearl. This is called, used to be called a white magic eraser. Yes, because it's white. The gum eraser. Don't bother trying to chew that. It does not mean to chew. It's just a gum eraser. And the kneaded eraser. My favorite. Oh! This is my favorite. Okay, and the reason I'm showing you how this looks is because I want you to see how this whole thing is working out. I want you to see how it works out. You take this out of your package here. Oh, there we go. And what you want to do is exactly what I am saying here is you want to knead this eraser. Now I'm going to explain why there are 4 different types of erasers. You can see I'm taking this and I'm actually pulling it apart. Not apart, I'm just stretching it. And this is what you're doing. You're actually warming up your eraser. What's the difference between all 4 of these? Glad you asked. All right. With the kneaded eraser, with these 3 erasers here, are going to be used on your paper, which is drawing, sketching, illustration board, both cold press and hot press, and your Bristol paper, both cold press and hot press. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. The pink pearl is used for your paper such as newsprint. Now, newsprint is an acid paper. Now we're starting to head into papers. So let's talk a little bit about that. Acid paper, the difference between these two papers, and I am using a drawing paper here, is that it is made from the bark of trees. Books were originally made that way in the 15th century. And the sad part about that is that because the acid breaks down, the books fall apart and they dissolve, especially in different climates of weather change. If they're not in a controlled environment, they're going to fall apart. There were hundreds of books that they had discovered in Italy, and when they went to reach for them to pull them, they just fell into dust, forever gone. That is made out of wood pulp. All your acid paper will be made out of wood pulp, cardboard, newsprint, and this is the reason why your newspapers turn yellow. Acid-free is made out of cotton. They actually have cellulose. If you've eaten lettuce, if you've eaten corn, you know it does not digest. That's how strong it is. The acid in your stomach cannot break it down, and therefore it can't be broken down. This is why we call it acid-free. So if you're using an acid paper, it will say, it won't say acid-free on it, and you can presume that it is an acid paper. Now, the newsprint, there is acid-free newsprint that has come out. It's a blue tint to it. But I prefer just to use a regular newsprint. Why? Because that's going to be your paper you're using for just sketching, thumbnails, quick sketches. It's cheap, inexpensive paper because you're just practicing with it. And that's the paper you're going to probably want to start off with, newsprint. It's extremely cheap. All right? So you use this eraser, which is the pink pearl, for that. That's what you're going to use. Okay? Because when you use the pink pearl, what it actually does is, I'm not sure if you can see it on the screen, but there is a pink film right in this area. It also tends to break up your fibers on the paper, especially if you're using a softer type of fiber. So you don't want to use that. That's where this one comes in. But before we go to this, let's talk about this one. Now, what I should have done is I should have opened these up before, but I wanted to show you what they look like wrapped up. So I will just take my X-Acto knife, be very careful, because I do not want my wife to scream at me and say, "What did you do? You were not taking care of yourself." And that's exactly what happens to a lot of us. And here we go. This here is, we called it, and I'm not sure if it's still called that, but we call it the magic eraser. It's called a white magic eraser. It's great for picking up on acid-free paper. It's really good for generally wiping stuff out without having to damage your image, or excuse me, your paper. The gum eraser, this is a gum, also is good for working on acid-free paper. So these two here are good for covering large areas here. You're going to want to use all four. The kneaded eraser, which is my favorite, allows me to be able to, let's say I needed to get, okay, it picks up here just like this without damaging any of my fibers on the paper. But here's the neat part. I can take my tip, round it off, and let's just say I want to pull just a little bit. And I want to get in between here. Look at that, huh? I can come in here and I can pull some of this stuff up here, just like that. Get a nice little, look at that, huh? That's what you're able to do with this here. You're able to pull that off and really get this all set up to where you want to use it for small, darker areas. Okay. All right. We've gone over a lot of the tools here. Now, let's talk about, whoops-a-daisy. how we utilize these tools. All right. So as you can see here, and I'm going to use the 45, 60, 30. I can now take, and I'm going to use a 10B. And if I want to create a line straight across, I can now make my lines perpendicular and totally horizontal. I can now move my paper. And again, here's what I was talking about, where I can see the inside here. This is the reason why I'm using a drafting T-square, because let's say I want to line that corner up right here. That's where I want to go. Let's say I want to come up and line this up here. I can line all of this up and see exactly where my pencil is going to match up. If I am trying to create a line vertically here, I can see where I'm going to match up there, how I'm going to match up here, how I'm going to match up here, without having to guess or lay my pencil and leave a mark. Look at that, huh? Now again, I am not using straight or a really strong tip. That's going to be on the next episode where we start to draw, and I'll have these really sharp, utilizing all of this. But I'm just using this to show you all our tools and what we're using them for. Okay, we've covered about the tools, and we've touched a little bit about paper. Let's talk about paper a little bit. Okay? There are 4 types of papers. Generally, there are other types. There is the halftone paper, which we'll get into. There is a gloss paper. There is different types of paper. But the 4 that you're going to want to remember are going to be newsprint. Again, newsprint, you will find it says straight on there, newsprint. You're going to find the next is sketch and drawing. Now, sketch and drawing have the same properties. They are both higher quality, but sketch is a lighter weight paper. And the reason for that is because if you're sketching and trying to create something that you're going to want to keep for your reference, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to keep your paper for your newsprint. You definitely will. But if you're having to draw a sketch on that, it's on a higher quality paper, but not as heavy as drawing paper. Now, drawing paper has a heavier weight to it. And that's for the clients that you're going to be drawing for. If you're going to be doing a portrait or a landscape or a still life, and they want that on paper, that's the paper you want to use, the drawing paper. The next paper is called Bristol paper. It's even heavier yet. It's a heavier stock, and it comes in a cold or a hot press. What's the differences between the two? You'll feel one that's slick, and the other one has a tooth feel to it. What's the difference? When it comes out of the mill, the hot press comes straight out and it's hot. Straight out, dries out. Cold press, they bring it out and they put a mist of water over that, cold water, and it creates it wrinkles up the edge and gives it a rough tooth feel. Hence the reason cold press paper. You'll find that on an illustration board as well. The last one is illustration board. Can't find much of illustration board anymore because of now the iPad and a lot of the computer work that you generate and stuff, and that's what we're getting into. But this is going to help you before you buy that $1,000, $2,000 iPad. This is where you want your foundation to be. Right here, this is where it starts so that you can get into that, and we're going to get into that a little later. Just as a reminder too, I'm going to be launching these information, these iPods, these every Thursday at 3:30. So for once a week. Now what's good is that you'll have a whole week to practice. So if you've been practicing on form and technique and even those circles, this is a great time to start practicing on those, to really work on those circles in itself. Which reminds me, templates. These are used to make circles. Now, for those of you who are beginners, hey, there's no such thing as cheating, and I'm going to tell you that straight up. I've been in this business for over 60 years using a template. And already I've gotten comments about the first video about how perfect my circles were rather impressive. Again, that's years of experience. It didn't happen overnight. Okay? You don't run out on the track field and make an Olympic record or a national record and just start just start running after a few weeks. Give yourself some time. Practice. You want to continuously practice. Hey, right here, look at that. Perfect circle. Utilize that until you're able to get your own circle. Again, this is not cheating. I will challenge any teacher out there who turns around and says, that is cheating. No, it's not. I want to encourage you. You want to take steps, and each one of these steps are small victories that you go, yes, I've done this. Okay? That's what you want to do. Trust me. I've been there. Done that. Okay. We talked about paper. Now, I can't really show you the paper, but hey, go to Hobby Lobby. Not a sponsor. Check out the paper. Bristol paper, newsprint, drawing paper, sketch paper. Yes, you'll see watercolor paper. That's different. Look at those four. And if you want to start off with some newsprint, drawing paper, and or sketching. Don't worry about the Bristol board. Bristol paper is later on down the road. You don't need that right now. You'll probably need a pad of newsprint, definitely newsprint. And then you can end up getting some drawing paper where you can start working on that. But for now, sketch and your newsprint. Invest in a board just like this. Hello? Okay, this will run you about $15. All right. Now, out of the arts, you'll find that drawing is probably the least expensive. When we get into painting, that is an arm and a leg. Oil painting, okay, you want to take out your first loan for that. I'm exaggerating, but it is expensive, and you're going to find that there is a lot of work in having to know all your skill set. Okay. Well, I think we've covered everything as far as our tools and what we're doing. Now, just don't follow me. Hey, I encourage you, go on YouTube, find some other things, find out other things about T-squares. There are hundreds of professional artists out there that can turn around and show you even more things, go into more detail about this. They really, really can. Go in there with paper. Go in there and find out about paper. Do your research. All of this is going to help you. Trust me. And you are going to get better and better. Or as my dad used to say, you're getting gooder and gooder. He was always playing around with words like that. All right. Hey, let's head out and we'll close this episode out.
All right. So that ends episode 2. What have we discovered, or what have we gone over? Well, first episode we talked about posture. We talked about how it is important how you're sitting and how you position yourself in your work. This episode now we talked about the tools of the trade. We talked about pencil drawing. Now, these aren't the only implements that we're using. Oh, no. We haven't gone over, there's charcoal, there's soft charcoal, hard charcoal, black charcoal, white charcoal. There's even a white pencil. And those we'll talk about later on when we start getting into other areas of drawing. But right now, this is the basics. These are the basics about pencils and your tools that you're going to be able to use and things you're going to need in order to create and to be the illustrator you can be. All right. These are the things, this is the very basic fundamentals. I'm telling you, go over this a couple of times. Study it. Practice these images, work with them, buy those tools, and really they're, in a matter of speaking, they're really not that expensive. But if you're really serious about drawing, if you're really serious about getting your art talents and your art skills even higher, I'm telling you, you will jump enormously. You're going to see your work and your performance move up quite a bit by using the proper tools. I'll tell you, you go to school and you're carrying this stuff, You're going to be very impressive. You'll probably even impress your teachers. Like, what? What do you? I know there probably won't be a locker to put them in. You may want to find a safe space for them, or even keeping them at home. But I'm telling you, when you get to school, you're going to see things where it's like, wow, this isn't the way we're supposed to be drawing. I'm telling you, this is the things that you're going to want to do, because if you are taking it seriously, this is where you're going to want to head. Now listen, let's say you're in 6th grade. Let's say you're even in 5th grade, and you're really thinking about wanting to get an animation. You started really at the right time. If you're in high school, it's not too late for you either. You can actually start building up on your portfolio now, because we're even going to talk about portfolios later down the road. Okay, enough of my chit chat. I'm going off and getting excited. I have a passion for the arts. And I think it's because of the fact that when I went to school, hey, I did not have the greatest art teachers. As much as I hate to say it, they really weren't all that great. Oh, well, they weren't. We never want to talk about the negatives, but that is something that kind of stifled me. I'll have to tell you about that story too sometime, when I went off to college and I met my professor, Carlisle Cooper, and how he straightened me out. But even at that point, I still wasn't listening. He was a gentleman from the South, yes, and called me Arnolfo. Really liked him. I wish I would have appreciated him a lot more. Then, of course, my mentor, Professor Richard Phelps. Oh man, did he ream me? Woo! He threw me under the bus, truck, train, and then strapped me to the bottom of a boat and dragged me out of the barnacles. But I learned. Seriously. Hey, hit that like button. Subscribe. We're going to have a lot of exciting things going on. It's going to be fun. It really is. And like I said, I will be posting every Thursday at 3:30. If we start taking off and doing really well, we might start going every 2 weeks. But that's way down the road. We're just starting off right now. You know, if there's only 100 of you guys out there, 50 of you, that's fine. You know, as long as I'm getting out there to you, that's great. So we're going to have a lot of fun. There'll be a lot of other things that we're going to have. So take care of yourselves, all right? And practice out there. Practice what you have. And even some of the skills that I worked with you right now. You'll be able to work on some of those things. So remember, may the Lord be with you always. Just practice that. Just keep working on that. And in our next episode, we're going to start working on drawing and composition. I almost said illustration and rendering, but that's going to be a ways down the road. So drawing and composition is next. And we'll see you next week. May the Lord be with you. Take care.
Pantarabamba!